Ever wonder how to save money for music lessons? Then stick around as I share 13 money-saving tips coming up. Hello and welcome. So glad you're here. I'm Dr. A and this is 5-Minute Music with musical helps for everyday issues. And today I'm going to share with you 13 ways you can save money for music lessons. If you're new here, consider liking, belling, and subscribing, and grab the free guide that goes along with this episode by clicking the link in the description below. Now let's get into the money. Here's some tips on how you can save money for music lessons. Tip number 1, take stock of your expenses. Very often families spend as much on 1 or 2 meals or activities out as it would cost to pay for an entire month of lessons for one child. It's all about priorities. We pay for things we prioritize, right? So consider your priorities, find places where you can cut back, and you might just find a way to pay for music lessons. Now, if you truly, honestly can't afford music lessons, and that's okay. I came from a very poor family growing up, still do. No car, no telephone when I was growing up. Lived in a 2-bedroom, tiny trailer house with 6 kids in 1 bedroom. Let me tell you, all the bunk beds, all the Chester drawers, it was a lot of crazy fun. So it's okay if you really truly can't afford music lessons. Don't give up. Find other ways for musical involvement, like tip number 2, cashing in at the school or community center or library or online resources. Do any of these places offer reduced cost music programs? If so, take advantage of those. Are there any private instructors that offer group music lessons instead of only private? We'll talk a little bit more about that later. While most of these won't replace the more personalized nature of private lessons, group music programs through the school, the community center, or even private instructors or online resources are great ways to get kids involved in music at a lower cost. What about YouTube or other online programs that are available? Often those are free or come at a very reduced cost as compared to private music lessons. So check up on those. Just make sure they're good quality programs if you decide to go with anything like that. Tip number 3, shop around. Again, utilize your library, online resources, yard sales, pawn shops for materials for lessons, because that's an additional expense that can get expensive. Check online at your local libraries to see if you can get any free or low-cost materials. There's hundreds of free lesson advice videos, low-cost music courses, or even actual lessons online that may be cheaper than taking privately every week. Many music stores also have annual sales as well, so keep a lookout for those. And also look for people who are selling music at yard sales. This is a great way to snag a lot of music at a lot lower price. Tip number 4, barter. Now, I bet you never thought that bartering could be a way you could pay for lessons, but bartering is a creative option for swapping services instead of using cash. So do you have any skills that you could swap in exchange for music lessons? If you do, find a music teacher that's willing to exchange lessons for your service. Tip number 5, selling stuff. Big or small, it's amazing how quickly random things that you sell can add up. And anytime you sell something, unless it's needed for an emergency fund or something immediate, put that cash in an envelope and set it aside specifically to pay for music lessons. Not only will you be paying for lessons, but you'll be simplifying your house, so it's a win-win. Tip number 6, shuffle the money. Well, let's say I have $250 saved under my car expenses. If I use my Visa rewards, I can get $100 in free gas, so that means I can take $100 from my car expense savings to pay for music lessons and use the Visa rewards to pay for gas. So how many things are there like that that you could swap around and pay for several months of music lessons? Tip number 7, take group lessons. As I mentioned before, you can save a lot of money by having your kids take group lessons instead of private one-on-one lessons. Also check your city or local college or university. Many may offer group classes to community members at very reasonable rates. Or also find a music teacher that teaches group lessons and see if you can get signed up for those instead of private. Tip number 8, take private lessons every other week instead of every week. This is a great way to have more time for your child to practice and prepare for their lessons, as well as saving quite a bit of money on the cost of private lessons. Find a teacher first that's willing to give every other week lessons, and you can substantially cut down the costs on music lessons. However, let me caution by saying you still need to be responsible when it comes to practice. Often people that take every 2 weeks instead of every week end up doing as little practice as they did in 1 week, but over a 2-week period. So instead of practicing 3 or 4 days over a 1-week period, they're only doing 3 or 4 days over a 2-week period. And if you do that, you will be wasting money. So as long as you're willing to be responsible when it comes to practicing, that can save you money. Tip number 9, creative gifting. Do you have relatives who are looking for gift ideas, aunts or uncles or grandparents that aren't sure what to buy your kids? Well, then what better way to invest in your kids than giving them an experience instead of more stuff, and in this case, music lessons. Maybe between help from your family and what you can put into music lessons, you can pay for music lessons for your kids. Tip number 10, buy used instruments. If your child's a beginner, you may want to hold off on buying brand new instruments until you know that this is the instrument that's going to stick around for a long time. Well cared for musical instruments can be just as good and effective as brand new instruments. So utilize eBay, Craigslist, and other online retailers, or even individuals that are selling their instruments, to see if you can find a good used instrument at a discount. But just keep in mind, it still needs to be a long-lasting, good quality, good sounding instrument. Otherwise, your child will be frustrated and want to quit with a poor quality instrument, and that means you'll waste money. And if someone's selling their instrument, check with them about possible music books and materials that they might be able to sell you along with the instrument, which would also save you money. Tip number 11, hire a young person. Find a college student or a neighborhood teacher who charges less. Now, please hear me, because this is really important. This is okay to do if the teacher you hire is a good teacher. Being young or cheap doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad teacher. However, as a teacher with over a decade of experience, I have to caution you that you usually get what you pay for. Cheaper and more convenient in music lessons usually means less experienced and potentially way slower progress and bad habits for your kids. Just make sure they know good technique and they know how to teach it appropriately to whatever level of student they have. I talk more about this in the video, How to Find a Good Music Teacher, which you can watch by clicking the link in the description below if you're interested. Another option is self-learning by utilizing online courses and resources. So if you're disciplined enough to help your child, perhaps you want to try self-learning. This is usually a lot less expensive than paying for private lessons. And that's great, just make sure those sources are reliable in teaching good technique as well. Tip number 12, practice, practice, practice. The more your child practices, and more importantly, how they're practicing, the better they'll get and the more they will get out of those lessons. So that means you save money on those lessons because you're getting more out of it. All right, tip number 13, utilize scholarships. Well, this is rare. There are music stores, music schools, outreach programs, nonprofits, and even private teachers like myself that scholarship students, so low-income families, can give their kids music lessons. Check around to see who may have a scholarship program for music lessons. Now, while these tips may not work for everyone's situation, there are ways to cut costs to supplement paying for music lessons and getting music lessons on the cheap. I hope you found these suggestions helpful. If you did, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe buttons now, and please share with someone else that might find this useful. And don't forget to grab your free guide, 13 ways to save money on music lessons and how to not waste money on music lessons, by clicking the links in the description below. So go ahead and leave a comment below and tell us what some of your tips and suggestions are when it comes to taking music lessons and saving money. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye.